Hello and welcome, I'm Counterplay, and in this Commander Deck Tech video we'll be looking at Noyan Dar, Roil Shaper. And let's read him real quick. For 5 mana, he is a Merfolk ally, 4/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put 3 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. If you do, that land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste, and it is still land. So this is going to greatly synergize with any instants and sorceries we're going to be pumping out through our Azorius deck, and I couldn't have think anything better than to play Azorius Control. So starting it off, we're going to have some light counterspell action here. I only included the 5. Arcane Denial, Counterspell, Negate, Scatter to the Winds, which is also an awakening spell, and Swan Song. There's not too many counterspells, it's kind of light. I don't like to run too many counterspells to overwhelm my opponents from allowing them to play their cards, but we're still going to interact with spot removals and sweepers. We're still going to be controlling the board, just not as harshly. So let's drop into our draw section. I'm including 15 cards here. Let's go through Anticipate for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards. Put one of them in your hand, rest at the bottom of the library. Next up we have Archmage Emeritus, which is a 4 mana human wizard 2/2. And it reads, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, we're going to be drawing cards. So as long as we're playing our instants and sorceries, we'll be drawing through this guy, as well as creating our elemental land creatures. Next up we have Dig Through Time, which is a Delve card. It looks at the top 7, puts 2 of them in our hand, the rest at the bottom in any order. I'm playing Drawn from Dreams, which is a sorcery, 4 mana. Look at the top 7, put 2 of them in our hand, with the rest at the bottom of our library. Also Dream Trawler, which is used to be an amazing standard powerhouse card. It's still great here. For 2 white, blue. It's a Sphinx that's 3/5 flying lifelink. Whenever we draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And whenever it attacks, we also draw a card. Last effect on this card, which is very synergetic with some other cards we have in this deck, it says discard a card. Dream Trawler gains hexproof until end of turn, tap it. So this is a very tough spot removal resistant creature, just allowing us to draw cards and being able to pump and gain some life. Next up we have Fact or Fiction, an oldie but a goodie. In Fact or Fiction, reveal the top 5 cards of our library, and an opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, put one into our hand and the other into our graveyard. So this is going to rely a lot on our opponents to make bad decisions, hopefully giving us a great opportunity to good cards. Next up we have Impulse. Look at the top 4 cards, put one of them in our hand, the rest at the bottom of our library in any order. Pulse the Grid for 3 mana, 1 colorless, 2 blue. Instant, drawing 2 cards, then discarding a card from our hand. Then, if an opponent has more cards in hands than we do, returning Pulse the Grid to our hand. So this is going to be a repeatable draw engine for us. It's repeatable instant, triggering our commander, triggering our Archmage Emeritus, and every time we're casting instants and sorceries, we have a lot more benefits through the deck. So this is just allowing us to keep it in our hand. As long as an opponent has more cards than us, which could be very easily done, especially with Dream Trawler's last ability, we can always monitor the cards in our hand by just discarding down to keeping our Pulse of the Grid in hand. Next up we have Recurring Insight. I love it for 6 mana, drawing cards equal to the number of cards in target opponent's hand. That necessarily isn't the greatest, because our opponents could have less cards than what we're really hoping to draw from this for 6 mana, but it has the added bonus of Rebound, which will be cast again as it resolves from exile at the beginning of our next upkeep, and we'll be able to draw cards from it again next turn. Rhystic Study, just another great way to draw some cards. Kind of a salty card, but we're playing control. Seagate Restoration. This is a new MDFC card. For 7 mana, we're going to be drawing cards equal to the number of cards in our hand +1, and it has the bonus effect of having no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Next up, an instant, Silundi Vision. For 3 mana, look at the top 6 cards of our library, reveal an instant sorcery card from among them, put it into our hand, the rest of the bottom of our library. So we're going to be digging a lot with a lot of these cards. Telling Time, another dig spell, look at the top 3, put 1 in our hand. Treasure Cruise, a Delve, draw 3 card. And Vanish into Memory, this is a powerhouse card for this deck for sure. For 2 and a white and a blue, instant, exile target creature. Any creature. You draw cards equal to the creature's power. Then the downside is, at the beginning of your next upkeep, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. If you do, discard cards equal to the creature's toughness. This is a great target for tokens and our animated lands, because whenever they return to the battlefield, they're just back to being lands and we discard nothing. So that will be a ginormous draw engine if we are able to have it target one of our lands that's been pumped up a little bit by our commander. Next up, let's move down to enchantments. I have a Ghostly Prison here and Propaganda. These are both kind of deterrent to being attacking us for our opponents to pay mana. And last up, I have Omniscience, kind of a salty card too, but for 7, 8, and 2 blue or 3 blue, we may cast spells from our hand without paying their mana cost. This will allow us to continuously play a lot of instants and sorceries we're holding on to in our hand, along with providing us a lot of draw with Pulse of the Grid, as long as we're able to put it back into our hand. So that will pretty much finish the game a lot of the time for us if we were able to keep it out long enough. Next up, I have some lands here I'll go over. I'll save those for last. We have some payoff cards from playing a lot of instants and sorceries. I'm including God Eternal Kefnet, which is 2 and 2 blue. It's a 4/5 flying zombie god. You may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card this way, copy that card and you may cast the copy for 2 less colorless mana. So it will allow us to possibly copy the spell that we're going to be drawing, the sorcery or instant, and playing it for a little cheaper. And it has the bonus effect of whenever it dies, we can put it, or it exiled, we may put it into our owner's library, third from the top, so we can always get it back. Next up, we have the new card Hullbreaker Horror for 7 mana. It's a 7/8 Kraken with flash, and this spell cannot be countered. I mean, they just loaded this card up super much. Super busted card. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1, as if it needed an option here. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, so essentially countering anything. And return target non-land permanent to its owner's hands. This is a busted card. With our strategy, we're going to be playing a lot of instants and sorcery spells, and this has just any spells, so even better for us. And we'll be able to get our instant sorceries back through graveyards and through its own effects, as I'll explain later. Metallic Summoning. This is a 3 and 2 blue enchantment. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we're creating an XX colorless construct artifact creature, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. This will allow us to keep some presence on the board with some creature tokens we're able to pump out as long as we're playing our instants and sorceries at the same time, controlling the board. And it has the last effect, we can pay 3 and 2 blue, exiling Metallic Summonings, returning all instants and sorcery cards from our graveyard to our hand. We can only activate it if we control 6 or more artifacts, which is not a hard thing to do. Next up, we have Shark Typhoon, which is another payoff for whenever we're casting a non-creature spell. We create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is a spell's converted mana cost, and has the other effect of cycling if you're needing a creature immediately. But it's just allowing us to keep tokens on the field as we're playing our massive instants and sorceries. Next up, we have Talran, another master benefitter for playing a heavy instants and sorcery deck. It allows us to create a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying every time we do. Twin Cast. This is going to double up on a lot of our instants and sorceries, and at the same time possibly catching an opponent off guard and taking advantage of what they're using. Next up, this is an all-star for this deck, View from Above. For 2 mana instant, target creature gains flying until end of turn. Doesn't seem that powerful, but if you control a white permanent, which is our commander or any white creatures or enchantments we have on the field, return View from Above to its owner's hand. This is a broken effect on some of these cards. Just like Pulse of the Grid, if we're able to get those cards back in our hand, recasting them, as long as it's an instant or sorcery that is going to trigger our commander, that we are able to cast over and over again, it is going to multiply that effect, and along with our payoffs too. This is a great card. This deck totally needs this in any form of it. Next up we have our ramp package. I have eight artifacts here: Arcane Signets, Azorius Signet, Felware Stone, Mind Stone, Smothering Tithe, which is a kind of a salty card, but will give us so much ramp through the game. Soul Ring, Talisman of Progress, and Thought Vessel. And then I just included this in its own category, Sorcery Rite of Revocation. It's just a powerhouse sorcery that can sometimes just win the game for us on its own. It's for 2 and 2 blue. It puts a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of any target creature. But it has the added effect of Kicker 5, so 9 total mana. If Rite of Replication was kicked, put 5 of those tokens on the battlefield instead. So if our opponents, or maybe we want to copy our Dream Trawler 5 times, but we can put 5 tokens of a creature into play, which some of those creatures that we're playing with and against can just end the game on their own. Let's see, next up I have a spot removal package here of 8 tiers. Probably a little more of you overlap some of these categories, but these are mainly our spot removals. Crush Contraband for 3 and 1 white. We can choose one or both, exiling a target artifact or exiling a target enchantment. I feel like exiling is such a necessity nowadays that it's worth just a little more mana to get the exile effect if we can. And it could be a 2-for-1 card. This is a great card. This enchant, this is another cheaper version, destroying target artifact or enchantment, so it's not going to exile, but it's also going to give us options for our opponent's permanents. Generous Gift, another one, destroy target permanent, any permanent, including lands and planeswalkers. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Next up we have Path to Exile. Exiles target creatures, controls may search as her library for basic land, put it in the battlefield tap, control a card. We are playing Pognify, Rapid Hydration. Both are going to be destroying a creature and putting a 3/3 token for our opponent into play. Reality Shift was another exile effect for a target creature, and they manifest the top card of their library. And lastly, we're going to close out the Path of Exile package with Swords to Plowshare. Just a 1 mana instant and exiles a creature. Next category, I have 9 Sweeper here. That's kind of a high amount, but like I said, we're playing Creature Light and Control Heavy, so they're not too punishing. A lot of them are bouncing. Let's start off with Coastal Breach for 7 mana. It has Undaunted, so it will cost less for each opponent we control, and it returns all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So this is very sought after phrasing, returning all non-land permanents, which will not hit our lands that are animated by our commander. So they will stay on the battlefield and pretty much wiping the board, leaving them open to attack. Next up we have Crush of Tentacles for 6 mana. It has the Surge option for 1 mana less. It returns all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Once again, another all non-land permanent card. If it was surged, we put an 8/8 blue octopus into play at the same time. Next up we have the All-Star Cyclonic Rift. Can overload it to hit every non-land permanent our opponents control. Devastation Tide, returning all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. And Displacement Wave. Now this has an option to pay X and 2 blue, return all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less to their owner's hands. So if we're wanting to, we can try to leave Noyan Dar out on the field with 5 mana. We can only pay 4 into it, and it's going to be bouncing everything 4 or less. It's a kind of conditional bounce for us. Maybe we can have the better outcome compared to our opponents. Next up we have Flood of Tears for 6 mana, returning all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. If you return 4 or more non-token permanents we control to our hand this way, we may put a permanent card from our hand onto the battlefield. This is going to be great if we're holding on to powerhouses like Omniscience, or we're holding on to Dream Trawler. Let's see, Keldric Leviathan is one of our other creatures, a few creatures for 8 mana. It's kind of hefty, but whenever it comes into play, returning all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So that's going to be another sweeper for us with an Earth for 7 mana, so it can come back from our graveyard and clear the board out for us. We have a MDFC card here, Undo Inversion for 8 mana, destroying all non-land permanents. And lastly, we have the Planar Outburst for 5 mana. It destroys all non-land creatures with the bonus effect of Awakening if we have all that additional mana And on to our next category, I have our tutor and graveyard recursion cards here. Mystical Tutor. It's a 1 blue instance, or our library for an instant card. Put it on top, and also we're running Pull from the Deep for 2 and 2 blue. It's a sorcery. Return up to 1 target instant card and up to 1 target sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand, exiling Pull from the Deep. And in the last section here, I have some reducers, because we're going to be wanting to play a lot of spells in the same turn, multiple spells like View from Above, and like I said, Pulse of the Grid. If we can reduce those effects, we can play them even more in the same turn. First off, we have Curious Homunculus, which is a creature that can be tapped for mana and spend this mana to cast instant or sorcery spells. But at the beginning of our upkeep, if there are 3 or more instant and sorcery spells in our graveyard, which is very easy to do, it will be transformed into Voracious Reader, which has prowess, but the main effect is instants and sorcery spells we cast cost 1 colorless less. Next up we have the Grand Arbiter Augustus, the 4th. White spells and blue spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less, and spells our opponents can cast cost 1 more, just slowing our opponents down and giving us more reducers to our instants and sorceries in any white or blue cards we may want to be casting. Jace's Sanctum for 4 mana enchantment. Instants and sorcery spells we cast cost 1 colorless less, and has a bonus effect of whenever we cast an instant and sorcery, we're going to be scrying. Primal Amulet for 4 mana artifact. Instants and sorcery spells cost 1 colorless less to cast. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Primal Amulet, and then if there are 4 more charge counters on Primal Amulet, we're going to be flipping it into a twin cast land, adding 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. Whenever a mana is spent to cast an instant or sorcery spell this way, copy that spell and choose new copies. So this is going to be a reducer and a copier if we are able to let it survive long enough. Lastly, we have just a Sapphire Medallion. This is a blue spell dominant deck. I'd say it's 80% blue, 20% white, splashing a little white for our controlling cards. Swords, Path, Vanish into Memory. And then what we have left is our lands. I'm running 36 lands here. Nothing too notable, but we're playing a lot of the all the indestructible lands, like the Cascading Cataracts, and a lot of self-animate lands, Celestial Colonnade. When you put counters on this, it still has the ability to turn itself into a creature with a bigger base power and toughness, and in this case flying and vigilance. So it'll be even bigger and has flying on its own. Darksteel Citadel, another indestructible land. Here's the Animate land, Fairy Conclave. Can become a 2/1 base power toughness creature with flying. This is after you've already put all your counters on it for the turn. So if you were to activate this beforehand, it becomes a 0/0. It reverts to the base power, I believe, from the Noyan Dar trigger. And just going down the list, we have a lot of islands here, basic islands, just very little amount of planes. The main reason is that I'm playing a terrain generator. A lot of our turns are going to be just draw, play land, go, and having a terrain generator out and just holding on to our open mana. Sometimes we want to be playing out our basic lands just to ramp in that way with terrain generator. So we need a good amount of basic lands. And then lastly, we have the Razortide Bridge, which is another dual mana source for indestructibility for our commander trigger targets. So that about wraps it up. This, like I said, is a very control-y deck. I'm purposely excluding all the extra turn effects through instants and sorceries. I just don't think they're as fun as what we could do by just having a more reactionary deck list here. Allowing our opponents to play their decks and interact on their own with us too is more fun than us just sitting there taking multiple turns over and over. So this is a very unique effect too. We're getting a big payoff from all the instances of sorcery control cards we can pack into this deck. And like I said, we're playing creature light, but each creature is a major powerhouse with our synergy. So here's a look at the deck's overall mana values. We have a bar chart here just showing the mana curve for the deck, and also we have some percentages showing 20% is white of the cards we have in the deck, and 72 of the symbols are blue. And we have 0 planeswalkers, 9 creatures, 13 sorceries, 25 instants, 11 artifacts, 8 enchantments, and 39 lands, including the MDFCs. All for around $405. And that wraps it up for this Commander Deck Tech video. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment below on what you think of the deck, and consider subscribing for more Commander Deck Techs in the future. And as always, have fun.